from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Your source for the Department of Energy's environmental cleanup news. Energycast starts now.
Hi everyone, I'm Summer Dash. Welcome to your February episode of Energycast. Let's get started with some Energy Bites.
Some of these properties that make it so interesting to use actually make it very difficult.
Monitoring mercury in water. This impacts people all around the world, but some of the most experienced scientists are right here in East Tennessee. We're going to show you how they're working to keep our water and fish safe. Plus, what happens if the levels get too high? You're going to see what they do about it.
Radiation work zones may sound scary, but the nuclear industry posts some of the highest safety scores. How is this possible? From special training to visors that allow you to see radiation. We'll talk about some of the steps and tools keeping our employees safe.
Whether we talk about work or we talk about something else, it's always interesting conversation. It's very relaxed. She is not just my wife, she's my best friend.
Would you want to work with your spouse? How about for more than 30 years? In honor of Valentine's Day, we are introducing you to a couple with successful career and marriage, and they are both intertwined. This next story impacts people around the world, but some of the top experts are right here in Oak Ridge. You've probably heard that fish can contain mercury. It's why pregnant women are advised not to eat large amounts of it. A team of researchers at Oak Ridge National Lab has come up with a way to monitor particles in water and follow them. This is helping track mercury levels. It's also guiding the future in some ways.
This is the Upper East Fork Poplar Creek watershed.
It's a focus here at the Aquatic Ecology Lab.
We've got a little setup here.
Researchers are studying how mercury flows and changes through our waterways.
Transporting from the landscape to stream.
It's the only metal that is liquid at room temperature.
Mercury is a really interesting element.
And it has contaminated soil, buildings, and water at the Y-12 National Security Complex.
Our biggest dose of mercury actually comes from eating contaminated fish.
It biomagnifies, meaning it becomes more and more concentrated as it moves up the food chain, absorbing into the tissues of its consumer. That can present environmental and health risks. Researchers are constantly testing the levels in the water and fish. And yes, they do bond with their work, like this sturgeon with just one fin. It's really tough to get rid of mercury once it's here.
Some of these properties that make it so interesting to use actually make it very difficult to remove from the environment. So once it contaminates the environment, it's very challenging to remediate.
It was used at Y-12 starting around the 50s.
Even though mercury stopped being used in the 60s, there are continuous ongoing low-level releases even to this day.
Now during that time, waterways were impacted too.
They needed flat land for all the infrastructure and buildings that they needed to develop, so they regraded the land, and the water has to go somewhere. You can't just get rid of the water, so that's why they piped the streams and then regraded the land over top of the streams.
Which makes the system here look like this. A complicated and intricate maze. To track mercury, scientists first had to map out the waterways.
We had to develop a very specific understanding of where are the hotspots of mercury in the system. How is mercury flowing? What are the pathways for flow?
Their research is leading to technologies that can immobilize this slippery element from dispersing in the environment. Part of that plan was sending out sorbents, or materials that would absorb some of that mercury.
We had a student that actually deployed some of these sorbents.
From there, it's a long-term study.
We're actually deploying them in the field and then looking at what happens to the sorbents over time, over the period of a year.
For more than 3 decades, the Department of Energy has focused on controlling sources of mercury in East Tennessee.
Mercury is one of the most complex environmental problems that the Department of Energy faces, especially here at the Oak Ridge site.
But with a national lab here, so is the perfect team to take on such complex research.
We can't just have one set of expertise. We really need to be leveraging on the expertise of many diverse fields. And that is the strength of working at a national lab.
Mapping the water flow, tracking mercury, and developing models take all sorts of experts, from chemists to ecologists to climatologists and more.
The right side, how different particle moves through the system.
Together, they are working to better understand how it moves and changes in the environment. That understanding will help EM use the right technology to control and eliminate it to keep us and the environment safe.
And this is very specific to East Fork Poplar Creek, but because mercury is a global pollutant, many of the lessons that we're learning here can be applied to other contaminated sites.
The work in here will most certainly spread out there. Now, there are 3 guiding goals with this work: reduce mercury concentration in water, reduce flux of mercury, and reduce concentrations in fish. You're getting a look at the planning before the prepping. Representatives from numerous companies recently visited the future site of the Environmental Management Disposal Facility. They were at the site to provide bids for work associated with preparing the area for construction. Specifically, those early steps involve rerouting utilities and moving Bear Creek Road and EM's private haul road. EM contractor United Cleanup Oak Ridge, or UCOR, is awarding that contract in the coming months. Fieldwork is expected to start this summer. We will, of course, keep you updated right here as that project advances. We've got an update for you about a topic we first covered in our September episode. DOE and other members of a trustee council held a public meeting to discuss natural resource damages on the Oak Ridge Reservation. The council also released a draft restoration and compensation plan related to those damages. This plan was available for public comment for 2 months. Now, those organizations just released the final version of that plan that incorporated all of that input. You can access the restoration and compensation plan by going to the link right there on your screen. Progress continues on one of Oak Ridge's biggest economic development stories. TriSoX is planning to construct a fuel fabrication facility in Oak Ridge. That facility is anticipated to generate and house hundreds of new jobs here locally. Leaders with the company recently announced the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has accepted its application for the facility. Now, if all goes smoothly, that review is scheduled to be done in June of 2025. TriSoX President Pete Papano shared that his team worked 3 years to develop the application, now with the NRC. The CEO of parent company X Energy said in a statement, "The NRC's acceptance of our application is a major milestone toward bringing this first-of-a-kind advanced nuclear fuel facility online." For many, the idea of working in areas with radiation sounds far-fetched and dangerous. We caught up with some team members who do just that. These men and women go inside old, contaminated buildings and get them ready for demolition. They tell us it's probably a little different than what you may imagine. Energycast's Cameron Jacobs has more about how these employees stay safe while working in that setting. Cameron.
Summer safety is a top priority when workers conduct some of the most challenging and sensitive work in the nation. The philosophy here in Oak Ridge is for workers to return home in the same condition that they arrived. We talked with several on staff here to find out how that's done on a nuclear cleanup site. EM and its contractor UCOR use both state-of-the-art equipment and the most advanced training techniques to make sure workers go home to their families just as healthy as when they clocked in.
We can simulate radiation, if you will, in a safe environment. So we can actually show people dose on an instrument and on an electronic pocket dosimeter, and we can see dose, if you will, but it's safe. It's a representation of the dose and not actual dose itself.
To keep the workforce safe, every person who walks into a hazardous work zone must complete trainings in the classroom and on the job site. They begin by going through 72 hours of specialized training. From there, they spend time in virtual reality, and then use controlled simulations that replicate actual tasks they will encounter in the field. Some of those tasks are different. Now that the cleanup is underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Y-12 National Security Complex, a change in scenery means a change in preparations.
Some of the scope that we're now completing is higher potential rad type work. Just different isotopes, more dose term that we're dealing with. The demolition of certain facilities presents challenges.
Before going into these settings, employees are sure to suit up and bring the right tools. They start with a process known as dressing out. That's where they put on protective clothing made from a material that helps guard against contamination. They are also equipped with dosimeters. Employees in areas with higher levels of radiation wear dosimeters capable of tracking radiation levels and giving alerts in real time. Workers also use these wands. They are designed to detect surface contamination. These wands are slowly run across the body or surface to ensure workers aren't bringing anything out of the buildings with them. This technique helps prevent the spread of contamination and confirms they're in the clear as they leave the workspace. Research at ORNL is creating some exciting advances in this technology.
In the future, we also have on the horizon technology that was developed by ORNL. It's called the Viper system, and it allows us to give a visual representation of radiation. So through an augmented reality type visor. So that's really exciting. We're looking forward to implementing that this year, hopefully.
With the right tools, training, and focus, Radiation Protection Manager Joe Biggerstaff says the nuclear field has a safety record that exceeds other industries.
So if you look at the nuclear industry as a whole, it is one of the safest industries to work in, much more safer, whether it's accidents or overexposures or anything like that. It's much more safer than typical industry that you'll find.
That's good news when it's time to clock out and get back to family. To add to that list of safety measures, the Department of Energy just finished reviewing and recertifying UCOR's dosimetry programs. The program ensures radiation levels are being tracked accurately and employees are in safe working conditions. Summer?
All right, Cameron, thank you. 2023 is a big year for the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. ORNL celebrates its 80th anniversary this year. Happy birthday! From the early days of the Manhattan Project to the world's fastest supercomputer, it has quite the history. As we approach a milestone year, we did catch up with leadership at the site to take a look at what's next. ORNL Site Office Manager Johnny Moore shares how EM's projects are helping ensure the site remains one of the nation's premier research institutions in the coming decades.
Every piece in this central campus that we're able to remove is impactful for us on the original part of the laboratory versus what we've done to grow around it over the past 80 years.
It means it's a lot of progress in the cleanup mission for UCOR and for our client at the Department of Energy here in Oak Ridge. Means us cleaning up the environment and ridding the facility, particularly Oak Ridge National Laboratory, of some of the older buildings to make room for their continued mission and their continued growth.
We're doing advanced science and going to the next generation and what the next technology is going to be. So this is going to provide us space to be able to move on to the science that we're looking forward to in the future too.
ORNL's construction started in 1943. You can see a timeline and learn about its history over at ornl.gov. We are plugged into community happenings. The Oak Ridge City Manager is retiring. Mark Watson has been in the position for more than 12 years. Watson's last day is expected to be in May. He has worked in city governments all across the country over his long career from Arizona to Texas before ending up in Tennessee. Council members say the search for his replacement will be nationwide. We'll keep you posted on that right here on Energycast. There's a new exhibit at the American Museum of Science and Energy in Oak Ridge, as if that place could get any cooler. The exhibit focuses on the James Webb Space Telescope. It's the largest optical telescope in space and can see objects farther away than the Hubble.
It's kind of a time machine in a way. It is, because that light takes so long to travel here that you're seeing sometimes back near the Big Bang.
The exhibit targets all the senses. The scent of space lets you smell. Get this, astronauts report space smells like burned steak. They say the sun is kind of like a giant grill.
It's spewing out all of these sticky hydrocarbons, that kind of thing that you get from the grill while you come back in from grilling and you have that smell on you still. Astronauts were dragging that in.
And they hope to make that exhibit permanent. AMSI is also nearing the start of its annual public bus tour program. The 2023 season kicks off in mid-April, continues through November. That tour is really neat. It offers visitors an up-close look at Oak Ridge's historic sites and gives updates about the important work that's still happening today. Due to its popularity, AMSI is opening registration early on March 1st. You can register early and save your spot by going to amsi.org. Scan that little box on your screen. That'll take you right over to the website. Hey, we think we're really fun to work with, but I'll admit our bias here on this one. We did want to let you know we are now on LinkedIn. Check out the Department of Energy, Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management. We're going to post some job openings and employee updates right there. If you see a position that fits your skills, we would absolutely love to take a look at your resume. Careers in Oak Ridge are fulfilling, growth opportunities are constant, and there is plenty of work to be done. And we're also on Instagram. Our goal is to connect the community to the missions that matter. You can find the latest DOE OREM news, some really neat history, and other impactful posts over on our Instagram page right now. We're going to let you know what's happening all across the Oak Ridge Reservation right there. We are always happy to hear from you and answer questions. In addition to LinkedIn and Instagram, remember you can still find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Like, subscribe, or follow to stay on top of the latest news and information in the energy world. It has been an honor bringing you the latest environmental management news online and right here on air. Recently, Energycast was highlighted in an article. That report outlines our communications goals and why we launched this show. If you'd like to read it, the link is right there on your screen. As always, thank you for watching, and thank you for trusting us with your EM news.
I think if you just spend all your time in the field, you tend to become parochial for the field. And if you just spend your time at headquarters, the same.
The top Oak Ridge EM leader is back in the building after a year in Washington, D.C. with new perspective. Find out what strategies he's bringing to our area from his time serving at headquarters. Love at first handshake. He says he knew from day one, but it took her a little bit longer. They met at work, they had lab dates. Now they are celebrating 32 years of life and career together. Ahead on Energycast, they'll tell us how they make it all work. Welcome back, Jay Mullis. Mullis had been serving in an interim role for the past year at headquarters in D.C., but is now home with us in East Tennessee full-time. He has returned his role as manager of the EM organization here, so we wanted to check in with him now that he's back walking the halls of the federal building. Public Affairs Specialist Ben Williams caught up with Mullis.
So welcome back.
Thanks, Ben.
You've been at headquarters for, I guess, over a year now, and this is the 2-week mark where you're back in Oak Ridge.
It was interesting for me to get there, and you know, I've been with EM, in fact, back before it was called EM, since 1995, and thought I pretty well knew everybody that. No, there's people that have worked here longer than I had. I didn't know who they were or what they did. So it was interesting from that perspective to get there and find out what all they did.
Really broad portfolio.
Yeah.
You get exposure to a lot of things. You've been with EM for a long time. But
I'll go ahead and say it. Yes, it sounds like Ben, I remember how we came up with the formula for dirt. Since I'm as old as dirt. So, yeah.
Did it give you exposure to new things or new appreciation for EM in any
Yes.
ways?
So it allowed me to see better how EM at the headquarters level fits in with the other program offices. You had somebody acting in 4.1 and you had, in 4.2 and somebody acting in 4.3. So one of the first things was to get those SES positions filled. So we did that. Maybe that was my biggest accomplishment. I don't know.
I was about to ask, what are you most proud of from your time there?
Probably that, which is not a trivial exercise anymore. You would think that backfilling would be, but getting those key positions in place, and then probably some of the work we did on high-level waste.
DC or Oak Ridge?
South Carolina. So
you've learned the art of negotiation from your time.
I don't know about that. I've enjoyed my time at both. I will tell you that moving into that role was quite the stretch for me. I mean, my career going all the way back to when I worked for the Navy was a field focus, right? You had physical work to accomplish, and when it got accomplished, it was done. Whether it was overhauling and refueling a nuclear submarine, getting it back out to the fleet, or tearing down buildings, cleaning up dirt, you can see physical progress. That's a lot harder at headquarters, especially in the organization I was in, because most of the work that you would enable takes place down at the field level, And so you get to a point and you kind of turn it back over, right? So you kind of set a policy up, help move some things, perhaps through the Federal Register, that type of thing. Once that's done, now it's okay, field, go get with your contractor.
Thank you for taking the time to sit down and tell us about your experience.
Yep.
Thank you, Ben. Laura Wilkerson had been leading the EM organization in Oak Ridge while Mullis fulfilled his duties at headquarters. Wilkerson is now continuing her previous position as deputy manager. With Mullis back in Oak Ridge, we've got an update on his previous position on EM's leadership team in Washington. EM announced that Randy Hendrickson will now serve as the acting principal deputy assistant secretary for regulatory and policy affairs. Hendrickson previously served as a senior advisor in the Office of Field Operations. He started in this new role on January 29th. We also have another leadership update for you in Oak Ridge. We previously covered Dr. Thomas Zachariah's retirement from his post as ORNL's director at the end of 2022. Jeff Smith will serve in an interim capacity while the search for a new director is underway. Smith had previously served as ORNL's deputy for operations for 21 years before retiring in April of 2021. We'll keep you updated on that selection in the months ahead. All right, would you want to work with your spouse? Be honest. These two have spent an entire career together. We are finding out how they have succeeded in love and career. And love comes in all forms. Some say it feels like butterflies in the stomach, but this truck driver, I think he'd call it a fizzy feeling. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, whether you're a fan of Valentine's Day or not, these next few stories will surely make you feel the love. It is February, so we scoped out some work couples. Do you think you could work with your spouse? Well, we found a husband and wife who have spent their entire career together. We sat down with them to ask them how they've done it and maybe get a little bit of advice from the pros. They say love takes work. These two know the true meaning of that phrase.
He has all the qualities that I've been thinking would be ideal.
It was 1990 and Jorge Gonzalez was working in Puerto Rico when a new employee showed up.
She was very professional, very polite, very beautiful. It was a great first impression.
It was love at first handshake for Jorge, but Ana didn't even notice her future husband.
Not on that first day that I was introduced to the whole company. Later on, I met him because he always showed up on breaks or for lunch.
One of Jorge's co-workers who was leaving temporarily recommended Ana fill his spot.
I don't know where he is, but I would send him a ham every Christmas for the rest of his life.
She was all business, but persistence is a skill you might find on Jorge's resume.
I would go to her office and she would very politely say, "Excuse me, I have something else that I need to do."
He knew he needed to act fast, though. An opportunity had come up that would bring him to Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
On February the 14th, 1991, St. Valentine's Day, I sent her a teddy bear and chocolates.
I just called him and thanked him for the arrangements, and then he immediately invited me for lunch, and I thought, well, I cannot say no, so let's go and meet this guy.
Over the next 2 months, they would spend their time together at work, on their lunch breaks, and in the lab at night where Ana was still working on her master's.
She was working with a sludge. Can't think of anything more romantic.
By April, they were engaged, just 2 months after that Valentine's Day first date.
It's crazy, but that quality time we were together almost every single day, not only at work, but then he would come with me to the university, help me with the lab work.
In August, surrounded by family, friends, and of course, co-workers, they married. By September, the newlyweds were moving to the Smoky Mountains for Jorge's new job.
For the next year, I'm working on my thesis, but from distance. That was prior to internet, so I would send a floppy disk in a FedEx envelope.
10 years later, their son was born.
The fact that we both worked for DOE when we were raising our son, it worked fantastic because we had the flexibility.
These days, they work in different areas on the reservation. Lunches and lab work don't bring them physically together, but one thing has remained.
Whether we talk about work or we talk about something else, it's always interesting conversation. It's very relaxed. She is not just my wife, she's my best friend.
Sure, love takes work and work takes work. But for this couple, it all just works. That's not the only love story we have to share from the workplace this month. Our investigative team stumbled onto another one when we spotlighted the Water Warriors last month. You might remember Trampus Basler. He's a key member of that team who spends his days on the road. He has a constant companion in his cat.
I was trying to hide it, but you done heard about it. Oh yeah, Dr. Pepper. Yeah. I would say it's lifestyle, yes. Me and Dr. Pepper.
We are so thankful for Trampus and the entire Water Warriors team. They are awesome, and they do have a great sense of humor, of course, but it is far surpassed by their hard work keeping our environment safe. During heavy rain events, Trampus is on the road long hours, carrying truckloads of water for treatment at the Oak Ridge National Lab and out of nearby waterways. And by the way, sources say all that hard work is fueled by nearly half a dozen Dr. Peppers a day. Thanks for continuing to watch and trust Energycast as your source of news on the Oak Ridge Reservation. We hope you aren't afraid of heights. Next month, we're taking viewers 250 feet up with employees who are doing some high elevation inspections. We're also going to have an update on that tall K25 viewing platform. In next month's episode, we'll announce the name of the contractor who will build that facility. We will also have a chance to talk with some Anderson County officials who are coming onto the site to learn more about EM's work. You can expect all of that and more in our March episode. Thank you so much for joining us for Energycast. New episodes come out on the third Sunday of the month. You can watch on air and online. We post Energycast episodes on our Facebook and YouTube pages the day after they air. You can now find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We are always happy to answer questions and share information with you there as well. And remember, if you work in environmental management in Oak Ridge, keep us in mind if you come across a story. We are always looking for news tips and story ideas from all across the reservation. Email your idea to oakridgeem@orem.doe.gov. Let us know there. You might just see it right here. We'll see you next time.